Ram asked, "It is evident that Brahman alone exists, O holy sage. But then why do even these sages and men of wisdom exist in this world, as if so ordained by God? And what is God?" Rama's asking why certain things exist. If everything's the absolute, the Brahman, then how come differentiation between I and the world exists? How does time exist? And now how do holy sages exist? And what is God? Vasistha replied, "There does exist, O Rama, the power or energy of the infinite consciousness, which is in motion all the time. That alone is the reality of all inevitable futuristic events, for it penetrates all the epochs in time. It is by that power that the nature of every object in the universe is ordained. That power, Chit's Shakti, is also known as Mahasatta, the great existence, Mahaciti, the great intelligence, Mahasakti, the great power, Mahadrsti, the great vision, Mahakriya, the great doer or doing, Mahodbhava, the great becoming, Mahaspanda, the great vibration. It is this power that endows everything with its characteristic quality. But this power is not different from or independent of the absolute Brahman. It is as real as a pie in the sky. Sages make a verbal distinction between Brahman and the power and declare that creation is the work of that power." There's lots of ways we can talk about it, but fundamentally they're just ways of talking about it. But what we're trying to do is get some sense of it. Ultimately, really, we want to have a direct experiencing of Brahman, acknowledge our consciousness, allow our consciousness to rest in itself, allow our attention to rest in itself. And that is Brahman. That's where everything stems from. Brahman is not some external power. How can it be? It can't be. I mean, this is the tragedy of religion. When you regard God as some remote, omnipotent dictator, it's tragic, really. How can God be separate? How can God not be intrinsic to your being? How could God not be operating at a fundamental level within your being? So it's about getting some sort of relationship with that. And a lot of these words, which I think are really they're worth dwelling on. The great existence, Mahasatta, the great existence. That's what it is, the great being, the great existence. Mahaciti, the great intelligence. I've spoken before about how this intelligence is what brought our intelligence into being. Whether you regard it as the universe or what is going on all around us, this intelligence is apparent. Its power, Mahasakti. The great vision. So there's this explosion of phenomena. It's going on all the time, this great happening, if you like. This great happening. The great doer or doing is what does everything. You don't do anything. It's this power, it's consciousness that does everything. The great becoming. The great vibration. It's the great dynamism of the universe. The distinction is verbal. Even as one speaks of the body as a whole and its parts, the infinite consciousness becomes aware of its inherent power, even as one becomes aware of the limbs of the body. Such awareness is known as Niyati, the power of the Absolute that determines nature. It is also known as Daiva or divine dispensation. We've got to be careful about this idea that it's all ordained, as if it's according to some master plan. It happens as it happens. There's no master plan being worked out. Nothing's really being ordained, but it only happens with, well, we could say, with the power or the authority of consciousness. That you should ask me these questions is ordained by Niyati, and that you should act upon my teaching is also ordained by Niyati. In other words, everything happens as it happens. It is as it is. It is as it is. If one says the divine will feed me and remains idle, that also is the work of Niyati. This Niyati cannot be set aside even by gods like Rudra. But wise men should not give up self-effort because of this, for Niyati functions only as and through self-effort. This Niyati has two aspects, human and superhuman. The former is seen where self-effort bears fruit, and the latter where it does not. Sometimes people say, trust in God, God does everything. And the implication is that you can't do anything yourself. In which case you might as well just lie down and let life get on with it. But there's obviously a little mistake in that way of thinking, which I think Vasistha is addressing here. If one remains idle, depending upon Niyati to do everything for him, he soon discovers that his life departs, for life is action. He can, by entering into the highest superconscious state, stop the breath and attain liberation, but then that is indeed the greatest self-effort. So it seems like if you want to stop, if you want to get out, you can't. Well, you could just stop, couldn't you? But then you'll die. And it seems to be offering an alternative here is liberation. But liberation here is seen as the attainment of a highest superconscious state, which isn't liberation. In yogic teachings, you've got different states of consciousness, and as we found earlier, there's actually one where after a couple of weeks meditating, your body vaporizes, and these are superconscious states, but that's not liberation. But I think that notion of liberation as a superconscious state is a very easy one to start thinking of. In some ways it is superconscious, but it's not one that arises through the results of lots of meditation, and that's been made quite clear in the Yoga Vasistha. But it is a traditional belief that you sit there in meditation and eventually you get liberated. But it's not got anything to do with liberation, and that's been quite clearly stated in the Yoga Vasistha. So I think they're just lapsing into the traditional belief here. The infinite consciousness alone appears as one thing in one place and another in another place. There is no division between that consciousness and its power, as there is no division between wave and water, limbs and the body. Such division is experienced only by the ignorant. So I think we can take Niyati with a pinch of salt. It's all a story, remember.